Hello and welcome to another free code session. My name is Jason Bach, and I have all my notes up for open generics, but what I really should be showing is this. See it's closed up here? See that? Yeah, that's good. I finally got it to work. And I had the notes up there because I wanted to go through a couple of things, not in any great detail, but the long and short of it is that from the last episode to this one, wow, did I uncover a whole bunch of small corner edge cases, which again is not completely unsurprising because that's happened so many times in the past. But this one really caught me out. And in fact, I think I have in the notes, let me go back to those. There's a section where you can see my despair caught up because I write something, where is it? Yeah, here. Things are just not getting better. I feel like I feel like fixing or changing something and then something else breaks somewhere else. I mean, like the number of errors that I'd get from the code generation tests would be like in the hundreds, and I change something, it'd literally go up to tens of thousands. And even though my regular tests would pass, it was just a nightmare. And I had to really just work very methodically on what I was trying to do. So it took some time, but I finally got there and I'm really happy. I just realized too that I didn't have integration tests, so I just committed to main, but I wrote these are based off of what was in the actual issue. But you can see here that we get the open generic, we can specify them here, flip it around, do different things. It works with makes as well. So I'm happy with this. I'm really, really happy with this in that you can now just say, hey, I want to have an open generic here. And then you can specify the type parameters in your expectations that way. It seems like a small thing, but I don't think any of the other frameworks have that. And for Rocks to say now, yes, we do have this, that's another feature that the other frameworks don't have. But there's also a story that I want to work on where I create an app that just goes through not all, but most of the popular mocking frameworks like MLQ and Substitute, and I think I'll pick Fake It Easy. And go through them with their features, try to come up with a table to show which ones do what or which ones don't do what the other ones do. And that could be some inspiration for me to say, hey, maybe I need to add a couple of things here and there and see if I'm able to do what the other ones have. Or maybe it's a feature that I think is a little bit doing too much, and I don't want to actually do that. I think that's going beyond what Rock should really be doing. So in any event, let me go look through the notes here. I didn't prepare for this, but I wanted to talk about a couple of things. One of the things was really this one. This is what started to make the turnaround is I had to be very careful with type parameters that were in methods, or more to the point that are defined on the method, and if they collided with type parameters on the parent. Because long story short, there are types where you could have a base interface that had a method that's generic and has a type parameter called T, but then in the inheritance hierarchy, you get down near the end of it, so to speak, to where it's actually the mock type, and they now have a generic class that is saying at the type level there's a T, and that does work. What you have to do then is you just need to rename, when you implement it, rename the T on the method to T1 or something else, doesn't matter, but it's got to be distinct for that. So there's like a scope there to say for a context, like the variable naming context, that if you have a collision there, that you've got to replace it. But it wasn't just on the method implementation. It's on the handlers. It's on projected types, callbacks. It's on the adornments. It's on the expectations. It's everywhere. And I kept missing places and not doing it right and running into cases where something was supposed to be like a type parameter, but it thought it had more than type parameters or something. And then the annotations for nullables was getting weird, and I had to corner case that. Oh, it got to be a mess. But what I did here, though, this actually started to help, is put in a base naming context class, because I was using the variable one all over the place. And they really do the same thing, but I was kind of mixing and mashing a whole bunch of concepts into that. And variable naming is just literally for variables. And leave it at that. Type arguments are for type argument naming contexts, and leave it at that. And when I did that, I started being able to, yeah, there's still a lot of things I'm writing notes here on that I had to go through and fix again and go through. But even though these should be done, they are done. But it finally got to the point where I was able to handle all these edge cases and come up with a build that finally passed everything. There were some also, like, did I put the number of the warnings? There's a couple of warnings now. They're like CS, they start with 8. There are 4-digit numbers start with 8. They have to do a lot with the warnings that you get. And it's because, yeah, right here, I see it up here. Okay. And those warnings have to do with the fact that the type that I'm trying to mock didn't, quote unquote, do it correctly. And unfortunately, there's really no way for me to figure this out other than to do some really weird things. And in fact, if the base type doesn't have something as nullable and you just decide to try to make it nullable, it doesn't work. So the only thing I could really do in these cases is to just put in like 4 or 5 pragma disables at the top and then pragma restores and leave it at that. So finally got through all this stuff, have it out there. 8.1.0 hasn't been released. There's probably a couple of other things I want to do, but I might push those to like a 8.2 release and just get A1 out the door. And again, nobody's like pushing me to do any of this. I don't want this to sit there for too long and not have it there when other features could come in after that are somewhat minor. So again, this is also fun for me as a learning experience to figure out things, get really deep into semantics of inheritance and type parameters and generics and all that stuff that I didn't really think about before. So again, good learning experience. And now I have a new feature. One of the things I'm thinking of, and I mentioned this before, is that naming is hard. And I think I really need to go through the library at some point and say, what names do I need and where, and how do I become consistent with all this stuff? There's just not a lot of consistency, and I feel like I'm doing little hacks here and there to get names right. I don't know how I'll be able to handle this, or if it's not really a fix, just make it cleaner so it feels nicer and easier in the code. So that's one thing I need to do in the future. Another one is I'm considering is instead of doing all these like type argument contexts, naming contexts and stuff like that, when I do the generation, is to do that when I create the models. Because whether the name is T or T1, it doesn't really matter. It can be what it needs to be there. And then when I get to the code generation phase of the pipeline, I can just use what's there. I don't have to do all this work to figure out, okay, what should the name actually be at this point? I already know what the name should be. So it's a push of some code from one phase to another earlier one. And it won't help let me rephrase that. It won't hurt in terms of equality, because whether a type parameter for a method is T or T1, as long as all the things that were marked with T1 or typed as T1 or T are now T1, that's fine then. It's still correct. And then when I do generation, again, I just don't have to worry about it. I can just use the name that's right there and move on. So I'm considering doing that. I don't know if I'll actually do that, but I think that will be helpful in terms of trying to figure out what the right name should be for certain things. And then I also don't have to like have a naming context when the method isn't generic, because if it's not generic, it doesn't matter then. The names of the parameters are either closed type names like string or GUID or something like that, or it's the name of a type from a name of a type parameter from the type itself. And that's fine. Either you made it a closed generic or an open generic. Doesn't matter. It's that name and that sticks. only when your method is generic, and not even properties or indices, because they can't be generic in and of themselves. So only for methods, do this, and maybe that makes it a little bit quicker and faster and less work overall. So that's something else I'm thinking of. And then also just toStringing. A lot of the work that I did here, I had to go into the debugger and look at names, and I realized when I was hovering over methods, models, or type models that the name wasn't there because toString wasn't overridden. And so I'm like, okay, maybe I should make these a little bit more friendlier for debugging. So that's a minor thing, and that's mostly just for me, but it will help overall. So that's all the work for Open Generics. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next. Again, as I always say, lots of stuff to look at and work on and figure out and have fun with. And that's the whole point of this channel, is just to explore and look at things and try to solve new problems and see if I can make it happen. The one thing I want to end with, though, is I've noticed since I've switched to this setup, which I'm very happy with overall. Don't get me wrong. I'm very, very happy with the way things work now in terms of recording. The one thing, though, I'm a little concerned about is, and that's just the way the videos have come out before, is they look a little fuzzy, which is ironic because on my laptop, the one I was recording on for 4 years over there, it actually looked clearer, and I'm not sure why. So that's a little concerning, and I don't like it that when I've been watching the videos I made that the quality has looked a little bit less. So that is something I'm going to look at. Either this video, I figured it out and I've got it so it looks better, or I'm going to just try some things and say, hey, you know, this quality isn't good. Let's now just do some test recordings and see what I can play with in Camtasia to make that better. So again, just a small thing, and hopefully that will be cleaned up in the future. So next episode, don't know what I'm going to be working on. I've got to do some work for VS Live again on my off hours and get some slides updated and ready to go for Chicago, which will be at the end of April. And then Redmond is in August, and Orlando, which I haven't submitted my talks just yet, but I'm going to be doing that this weekend, and hopefully I'll be there. I think that's in November. So we'll see what I get time to do anything in the next couple of weeks with Chicago coming up. But I always love doing these videos, and I love doing the work around them. So with all that said, thank you all for watching. Leave comments and questions below. See you in the next episode.